All right. I've just got one question. Are you feeling lucky, Pathfinder? Hello, folks. Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben, you here for another Pathfinder 2E video, and welcome to Luck in Pathfinder 2E. Might not be as simple as you first think. Before I get going here, let me just say I had a blast at ScarabCon in South Carolina over the weekend. Thank you to everyone who played both Pathfinder and Starfinder with me. That con was an absolute treat, and I look forward to seeing some of you again soon at MythicCon West. Now, community question before I get going here. Do you want my thoughts on the Psychic and Thaumaturge remaster content? Please sound off in the comments below. This is not engagement bait. This is a legitimate question because most of the changes leaked on Reddit already, and I'm wondering if you're good and I should focus on other strategy content, or like, hey, you're kind of one of the Thaumaturge guys. I would really like to hear what you think of the changes. So legitimately, please let me know. And as always, I am looking to grow this channel, and I am going to be making business decisions about the channel in the next month or so. So number go up as far as subscribers goes and YouTube members matters a lot, specifically right now. I do want to spend about 5 minutes at the beginning of this video following up my previous video, which is one of my best performing videos in the short term. People really enjoyed the discussion that came out as a result of that video, even if you didn't necessarily agree with all of my points. So I want to follow up on a couple of things that came up in the discussions there. And then we're going to get into today's videos, where first I'm going to talk about luck and difficulty as something that might actually be a linked function within this system. And I'm going to discuss both high variance plays in Pathfinder, as well as ways to reduce the variance that you are seeing and lessen the impact of things like luck and the physical roll of the dice. So let's begin by following up last video. So this section is fully follow-up to my previous video. If you didn't watch that video or you're not interested in the follow-up, timestamp down below, skip to the luck stuff directly. I have 3 things that I want to cover real quick. The first, the things that I call trap feats, I do think have some legitimate use cases. I define them as traps because they look good, but might actually be bad, and there might be a pitfall that you can stumble into if you're not paying attention to all of the minutia around them. And Reach Spell was one of the things that I called bad, and I stand by that. I think that is largely a very bad feat. However, there are use cases for it. And a great example of that is, I think it is Slow 6, which heightens to target a bunch of people. If you use Reach Spell before that, it is much easier to get a ton of people with that high rank slow spell. And that is a great time where Reach Spell will actually shine. I just don't think it's going to shine on the average character. To talk about weapon proficiency and armor proficiency really quick, I think that is going to be bad at a lot of tables. If your GM is not very flexible and doesn't give you time to retrain, those feats are going to feel quite bad. Whereas if you're at a table where you're like, hey, I leveled up, can I just retrain this instantly? And your GM is like, yeah, go for it. And they're super casual about retraining rules, then you're going to have a great time using that for a couple levels and swapping out of it. Your mileage will very much vary depending on how much downtime you are granted. Next up, I made a passing about I don't think I've ever been dying 3, which I believe is actually accurate in terms of my campaign experience and Pathfinder and Starfinder Society experience. Discounting things like Dawnsbury Days, where occasionally you're just going to try out some weird things, and some of it doesn't work out. And I think I, as the player, haven't been dying 3 because I designed my characters very defensively. So for example, the 3 characters that I have in bold here were my last 3 long-term campaign characters. All of them were meant to be played at a range of 60 feet or greater. And I did things beyond that to make sure that they were defensively strong. So for example, my Bard had the Beastmaster archetype so that I could free action, move, and really keep out of range of the enemies. My Necromancer had 2 different things that granted large amounts of temporary HP, either to the party or individuals. And my current Witchwarper, a Starfinder 2E caster, is focused on area control, and I also have bought a force field item that gives me something that amounts to somewhere between temporary HP and a shield. And when I think about all of the characters that I am playing in Pathfinder and Starfinder Society currently, there's a trend. Every single one of them can cast the heal spell. And I am making very defensive-oriented characters even when I make marshals. And my Starfinder Society soldier that I am having a delight of a time playing at level 1 had the toughness feat as well as a force field, as they were an android, and I could take an ancestry feat to install a force field directly into their body. And that is more tanky than even the average first level soldier was going to be. And as a follow-up comment, a lot of people are like, oh, if you've never been dying 3, your GM is taking it easy on you. They're not trying to kill you. You're lying about your encounter difficulties. And to this, welcome to Storytime with Thraben U, where I'm going to tell you about my last 2 sessions, which chained 3 encounters together of on honestly slightly absurd difficulty. So, on the way to a fight, we encountered a large number of obstacles, and my party was level 8 at this time. To give you some perspective, my character has 100 max HP, I think my girlfriend's character has about 80 max HP, and our guardian maybe has somewhere on the order of 150 HP. We were all significantly damaged before we even got to our fight. I have numbers for this because it was so scary that we were talking about it in Discord. Our Guardian, who has about 150 HP, went into the fight at 61 HP. Our Sorcerer had 29 HP, and our Exemplar had 43 HP. In addition to this, I was cursed by something our GM called Corpse Rot, which I'm not sure if it's an actual thing or if that was homebrew, where I received half healing from all sources of healing. So we did that before going into an encounter that was above severe difficulty. We had trouble in that fight, but we won. And then we got a 10-minute rest period, which we did not get in between the previous 2 encounters, before being thrown at a level +4 hazard. Now, in case you're not familiar with the GM encounter building and that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, at this level, a level +4 hazard is by itself above another severe encounter. It is not quite an extreme encounter on its own. It would need 1 more enemy to be that. But a level +4 thing is just tough in terms of the DCs that you have to accomplish in order to clear those things. And it was a tough couple of sessions, and I thought we were going to die. But we didn't. Maybe we got a little lucky. And I'm going to use this as the point to pivot into the topic of the day. And now I'm going to use this as a jumping point into my video. I didn't want to talk about encounter building for no reason here, because this is actually the point that I want to start with for the video. And if you haven't looked at this chart before that's on GM Core page 75, I think it and some of the supporting information there is pretty useful. Pathfinder 2E thinks of its encounters as 5 different types: trivial, low, moderate, severe, and extreme. And I use the terminology of like severe plus to indicate something that is between severe and extreme in terms of encounter building, where it's above severe but not quite too extreme. And most of the encounters that I play are kind of in this bracket of severe, severe plus, and extreme. And occasionally at like the beginning of a campaign when we're first learning characters, or we get to a new spell level and we need to test some things out to see how they're going to do, we might, very occasionally do a moderate or moderate plus encounter. But in talking about these things, the big thing that I want to emphasize is kind of the piezo descriptions, which I have simplified for the sake of getting them on screen here. And it is really only at the severe level and beyond that you should regularly be expecting things like character death, where like very, very good tactics might be required to get you through some of these fights. And I want to think about this in terms of luck. I don't think you need luck to beat a trivial encounter. If a trivial encounter by definition is you having a near 0 chance of losing, it doesn't matter how you roll that day. And the same should be true of a low difficulty encounter, where it is rare for you to be in any sort of actual danger. If a moderate encounter requires you to use some resources, be that potions or spell slots or focus points, daily resources, whatever, your luck might start to be relevant there, but you're still expected to win moderate encounters the vast majority of the time, unless something really weird happens. And it is when you start getting to severe that characters realistically can die. And when you get to extreme stuff, TPKs, total party kills, are on the table. And I think at this point, how the dice roll can actually change the scenario completely. The critical failures and the critical hits matter a lot. And some of these severe and extreme fights can be very scary and very swingy. And I'm going to go into Magic the Gathering tactics mode for a minute here to just kind of talk about some generic things that are very common in Magic the Gathering. And in case you don't know, I do have an entirely separate Magic the Gathering channel. All right. So, Magic the Gathering is a relatively high variance one-on-one game. And if you can do things that reduce your variance, you're obviously going to win more. So in Magic, you draw one card a turn. You're stuck with that card, unless that card could turn into a different card. So take a staple strong card, such as Ponder. This is one card. You could draw it for your turn, but then you could look at 3 more cards. So if you didn't like that Ponder, you turn it into something else. And if you didn't like those 3 cards, you could then shuffle completely and look at a 4th card. So cards like Ponder can reduce your variance. You cast these and you gain new options, and you are going to reduce the variance of a high variance game. But sometimes you actually want to increase your variance, and you need to know when it's actually good and important to take a risky play. So here is a less commonly played card, Final Fortune. You take an extra turn after this one. At the end of that turn, you lose the game. Well, what if you only need 1 turn to win, and you know it? Or what if you know that if you don't win in that next turn, you're probably not going to win anyway? Well, then this is largely upside, right? So you can do things that manipulate the amount of variance you have in Magic the Gathering. And you can kind of make your own luck, as it's sometimes called. You might be watching a player play Magic, and you might go, oh man, that player gets lucky all the time. And it might seem like they're being lucky, when in reality, they might be creating situations where they can get lucky. And these are very, very different things. So it might look like luck when it's not. Someone actually skillfully navigated themselves to that position. And a lot of careful play and decision making led to the point where they could get lucky by drawing the right thing. But if they didn't plan for that ahead of time, they might have made another decision that didn't allow certain cards to let them win the game. And so I want to try to apply this principle of making your own luck and manipulating your variance to Pathfinder today. So let's get into it. So how do you go about making your own luck in Pathfinder, and what do these high variance plays that you might need to look for occasionally look like? And I think it is easiest to illustrate this point with another story from my campaign. So we're going to go back, not 2 sessions, but 3 sessions to another above severe encounter that we did at my table. And I'm not sure if this one was extreme. It certainly felt like it. And a couple rounds in, it was pretty clear to me that TPK was on the table. We didn't have any downed players yet, but most of our party was very injured, and we were outnumbered, and we had bad positioning. Everything was going poorly. And at that point, I realized that I needed to gamble. I have a very powerful incapacitation trait spell called Void Whispers that can more or less completely take something out of the fight, even on just a failure. It is a very, very strong spell. But there was this problem. I did not know whether or not the enemy was going to be immune to the spell, because the GM had described them in a way that made it sound like they were some sort of mindless creature. But they didn't use that word, they just described them as real dumb. And if I cast this spell, and the creature was immune to things with the mental trait, I was in all sorts of bad shape, as it would have completely wasted my turn. But I did not believe that I could just outdamage and down an enemy, and everything was very bad. So I took a gamble, like knowing that if I was wrong on this gamble, it would mean that a bad situation was going to get even worse. I made the call. I cast the spell. I said, hey, GM, this has the mental trait. Is this thing immune to mental? And he went, yeah, it must be. And then we looked at the traits, or rather, he looked at the traits, and it didn't. My spell went off. The creature failed, or critically failed. I don't remember which it was. Either way, they were effectively taken out of that fight. And for 2 actions, I got so much value, and it spun the fight right there. That was the exact turning point of the battle, where it went from, like, we might die here, to we are probably going to win here. Unbeknownst to me, my girlfriend also had the same plan, as on her next turn, she cast the stasis spell that she got from being, I think it's called the Time Mage dedication, and she also used a powerful incapacitation thing that the enemy critically failed and took them out of the fight for up to 3 rounds. It didn't matter how many rounds it was out, we just needed it to stop fleeing so that we could catch up with it and take it down. But our spellcasters took very big gambles on incapacitation trait spells, and they paid off heavily for us. And I think just trying to brute force your way through with the fireballs and the lightning bolts would not have done enough damage to turn the action economy in our favor, like Void Whispers did, or completely stop a critical foe from fleeing from us like Stasis did. I don't think we could have just downed that, even on a crit fail from a lightning bolt. So knowing when you should take these like riskier high variance plays is, I think, really important. If that creature passed and they are stunned 1, that is an annoyance for them. They'll be fine. But if that creature is effectively like stunned 3 taken out of time, we catch up to them as an entire party, they're dead. And if they crit fail, like, they're interrogated, then they're dead. And even if you don't want to use the Starfinder 2E spells, there are plenty of online anecdotes talking about how Calm, which was previously called Calm Emotions, just completely ends fights on its own. And while Void Whispers is incredibly powerful at a single target, Calm is very good in a group, with the downside that it has to be sustained. And you might not end up doing much with a Calm if you are just giving that creature a -1 status penalty to its attack rolls. That's not very exciting. But when you know shit's bad, and you cast Calm on a couple of creatures, and you take 1 or 2 of them out of the fight, that might be the swing that you need to go for when things are dire. Now, my Witch Warper that I'm playing, I'm an Arcane caster. In many fights, do I feel the need to take a huge risk on an incapacitation spell? No, I don't. I'm scared of things being immune to the mental tag. I am afraid of calling what level the enemy is wrong, and they get a degree of success better on their saving throw. And a lot of times I might be better off blasting with a Thunderstrike, a Sudden Bolt, a Fireball, a Lightning Bolt, whatever. But when you are playing at the higher difficulties of the games, and things aren't going well for you, sometimes the way that you make it better is to do something that's a little bit crazy and risky, because that's the thing that lets you win. And there are plenty of other ways to manufacture your own luck. I think hero pointing your initiative rolls is one of the easiest things that most players can do to improve their luck within a combat. So much of the impact of a combat happens within the first couple of actions. In Starfinder 2E, I have found that if I hero point an initiative roll high, and get to throw a grenade while the enemies are still clustered together, that the impact of that grenade is just insane. For those of you that played that one scenario with me at ScarabCon, where I went first and hit 5 enemies at the same time with a high-level grenade, you know, it was nuts. And similarly, spellcasters who can throw down AoE spells, hitting a bunch of enemies, throwing down area controls, setting up a critical buff or debuff spell, or even just like taking your turn of preparation to activate your items, activate your consumables, get a sustain spell going, get a wand of shard storm going at the beginning of the fight. Getting to do those things before you get disrupted and your like cycle of things you want to do is disrupted, it's a really big deal. Another thing that is important here is realizing when you have to take the risks versus when you can afford to just take a generically good line. So, my GM has been using a bunch of spooky little guys in his campaign, and a bunch of them have really weird traits, and he often reflavors them so that it is not immediately obvious what creatures they actually are, which is something that I appreciate. It makes recall knowledge actions even more important than they normally are. And sometimes I have been faced with a decision, such as, does that enemy actually breathe? While Stifling Stillness might be an incredible spell, if I suspect that that enemy is going to be, say, immune to poison or something that does not breathe at all, that totally changes the evaluation of the spell, right? And so knowing when I feel like I need to cast Stifling Stillness because I need to waste the enemy actions versus when can I just do some damage or cast another control spell instead, those are important decisions. And we already talked about the mindless enemies potentially being immune to mental effects. There are a ton of very, very powerful spells, especially on the occult list, that might destroy an enemy. And then other times you're going to use 2 actions and you get nothing out of it. So while good old Fireball or Cave Fangs, if you prefer the difficult terrain, might not always be the highest upside thing you can do, sometimes it might be just safe to do because you are not in that much danger. Whereas when you are in danger, it might be time to fire off a max level incapacitation spell or some other control spell in the hopes that it has the impact that you want, because if you don't, the enemy might eat you alive. Luck and roll of the dice does matter in Pathfinder, and I don't want you to walk away from this saying like, the dice don't matter at all. Oh, they do. They do, especially in the extreme encounters, but you can make decisions that help to lessen the impact of luck. So part of luck is knowing when you need to get lucky to succeed and taking those risky lines. But another part of managing luck is realizing, when can I make the luck matter less, and when can I reduce the impact of variance on whatever it is my character is doing? And I like to seek out fortune effects whenever I can in terms of character creation. And many of them admittedly do have the rare tag, so there is GM fiat there for whether or not that is acceptable at your given table. But I will let you know that my current character has 3 different feats with the fortune tag, and having a few different rerolls in my pocket so that when I botch an initiative roll or fail a critical skill check or not want a saving throw, having some amount of rerolls just baked into your character outside of just the hero points you have, which are fortune effects. So just keep in mind you can only apply 1 fortune effect to a roll at any given time. Having those bonus fortune effects does really, really matter for the power level of my character. I think another thing you can do is try to stack up various situational saving throw upgrades. My previous campaign that I finished, I had a level 15 Necromancer when we were done, and I believe that my Necromancer had 6 different things that increased their saving throws in some capacity. Whether that was a situational +1 or turning a success into a critical success, it's relatively common that ancestries will have things that make you better against something in terms of saving throws. such as your better versus fear effects, your better versus mental effects. And it's not too difficult to pick up a couple of those things. And if you have extra general feats laying around because you are higher levels or some of the generically good general feats don't apply to you, there are also things like breath control that can come up if your GM likes to throw poisons around, which, spoilers, mine does. And you can also do some things to hedge against stuff that you know is coming. So my current campaign has a lot of bleed damage in it. Again, lots of spooky little guys running around. And so a bunch of our party members have staunching runes that lower the DC for recovery checks versus bleeding. And that has come up a lot because as our characters get downed, we don't want to be taking additional damage from bleed while we are downed and increasing our wounding value. That's no good for us. Similarly, if you have extra gold in your budget, you can pick up some Charms of Resistance to give you resistance versus damage types that are expected in your campaign. Especially if you are expecting persistent damage of a certain type, Resistance 5, when you are, say, taking a d6 worth of persistent fire damage, like that's such a big deal, right? You hardly ever end up taking damage from that. And even if it is 2d6, 5 fire resistance would go a long way towards reducing the amount of damage that you take. So if you do a bunch of stuff like this, like, okay, I have a couple of fortune effects on my character. I took a feat or two that made me better versus a couple of niche types of saving throw. And I did a couple of things that hedge against the persistent damage that might otherwise whittle me down. Each one of those things doesn't mean a lot, but together they start painting a picture of a character who is more adept in battle and will be better at dealing with a bad set of rolls or a bad set of persistent damage. I also think reaction spells are the biggest thing that lets you fight back against the variance of the game. And to make a Slay the Spire reference, because I bet a bunch of my audience plays that game, your reaction spells are your potions. Your potions in Slay the Spire are what you do when you just have a really bad turn and you just need something to get you out of that bad turn, and your deck might be able to cover the rest from there. Well, your reaction spells are the things that are going to keep characters from going down in the first place. And you might not be able to do this super well at early levels, but once you start getting, say, third level spell slots and beyond as a caster, it becomes increasingly easy to get to dedicate more and more of your resources to good reaction spells. And it is pretty common for me in a fight to use about 3 spell slots, maybe 4 sometimes, on defensive reactions. Things like Hidebound and Warping Pull that give some amount of resistance to damage. Those are fantastic. They overlap but are slightly different. In our previous campaign, I believe 3 of our characters had Wooden Double, which gives you a relatively significant amount of protection against critical hits specifically. I believe in our previous campaign, 2 of our characters had the Breath of Life spell, which can fully just stop someone from dying. 2 of our characters had Shock to the System, which lets you bring someone back if they do die. So we had a ton of, frankly, oh shit buttons. We had a bunch of emergency spells that said, hey, I'm going to make sure you don't go down. I'm going to make sure I don't go down. I'm going to make sure you don't die. Oh, you died? That's not actually a problem. You didn't really die. So, did characters temporarily die in my previous campaign? Oh, yeah. Was it a long-term problem? Nope, because we were ready for it. We took a large amount of things that overall reduced the variance of our party. And between the resources that we already had and a ton of good reactions, our previous party was incredibly strong in a way that our current party is not. But we're getting there. Having a healing font cleric in your party is cracked, folks. I do want to highlight a specific spell that has been an absolute lifesaver in my party that does not have a dedicated healer. And this is the Delay Consequences focus spell, which my girlfriend's character has from a Time Mage dedication. So this is neat, It just essentially says, not yet to some effect. And it is going to apply a little bit later. And this has been so clutch in allowing us to see how much damage someone is going to take and heal them so that they don't go down to the effect. Or we know that we can't stop them from going down, and we have 4 PC turns or whatever to figure out what we are going to do about it once they do get down. So we can preemptively get someone in a situation where they can use their healer's glove or their potion or whatever to get them back up as quickly as possible. PCs are very frequently going down in the campaign that I am currently playing, but we're not dying, and we're certainly not staying down for very long because we just have this wiggle room to plan for it. And by the way, my girlfriend's character has 3 focus spells, so she can just do this 3 times per fight. Whee! And I have been really praising casters in this video indirectly, but it's not all about casters here. We also have a guardian in our current party. And the guardian is very good at saying, no, you don't get to take down that squishy PC. And the guardian can even, I forget if it's stride or move half of their movement before they use the reaction. And there is just so much ability in our party to go, you get resistance 5 to that. I'll take that hit for you. Oh no, the guardian is going to go down. Delay consequences on the guardian. We'll figure it out later. And it feels like, although we don't have the big first aid kit of a bunch of heal spells, no one in our party can even cast the heal spell. We have a bunch of things that we can kind of jigsaw together into something that works. And the guardians and the champions and other classes that have similar defensive reactions can really help you reduce that variance. For those of you who have played mostly at low levels, people often aren't using their reactions because they just don't have the ability to do so. In our party, everybody is using their reactions all the time, and we need to because we are lacking in another capacity. So today has been a lot of anecdotes about my own personal party, and I honestly hope they are helpful to you. If you have some other reactions or tactics that kind of go in with what I am talking about in this video, please drop them in the comments. I'm sure other people would appreciate them. You know, if you found something else that is sort of like delayed consequences, like, hey, if you like this, you should think about building characters around this. Please let me know. I am always tinkering and looking for new things to help me save my party members. And folks, I need them. I need them this time around. Our party is struggling, but we're doing our best, and we're having a lot of fun while we are struggling, and occasionally there's some 5-minute turns as we go, how do we save this person who is 120 feet away from the rest of the group in dire straits? Like, what do we need to do to make that happen? That's part of what makes Pathfinder fun, right? I enjoy that challenge. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. See you.